This video will demonstrate how to complete the Dallas and Collin Counties CAS Intake Assessment. Note that I am logged in under Dallas and Collin Counties CAS. To complete the CAS intake, you should be logged in under this organization. If you are not, change your organization here by clicking on the organization, selecting this drop-down, and choosing Dallas and Collin Counties CAS. You should only see your organization and Dallas and Collin Counties CAS here. If you do not have access to the Dallas and Collin Counties CAS org and you need access, please submit a SpiceWorks ticket to request it. Once you have confirmed your organization and clicked Apply, let's navigate to our client workspace, find a client, and enroll them in CAS. Just like any program enrollment, the first thing you need to do is search for your client in the system when you're enrolling them in CAS. Let's search for my client, Graham Moore. And you can see that this client does not have an HMIS record. That means I can continue with creating a new record for this client. I'll scroll down in my menu on the left and click CAS. From here, I see the CAS and Diversion Intake. Notice that the normal intake button for a program enrollment is missing. You can only complete a CAS and Diversion Intake under the Dallas and Collin Counties CAS organization. If you use the intake button here at the top, you are not enrolling that client in CAS, and you need to cancel that workflow and change your organization. Once I click this intake, I'm prompted to add a new client, use the current client, or select another client from the system. If I had searched for Graham Moore and that client had a record in HMIS, I could go to that client's dashboard and then begin this intake. In that case, I would choose Use the Current Client. Clicking this button now will complete this intake for BB Test, which is not what I want to do. So instead, I'll add my new client, Graham Moore. Remember that the system does ask me to search for my client again and confirm that there are no duplicates detected. Once I have that confirmation, I can continue with entering my client's full name. Remember to enter what is true and accurate for your client at the time of enrollment. The basic client information page is the same as any program enrollment page, so I won't stop here for details. When I'm done entering the basic client information, I'll click Finish. Next, we have the Family Members page. If I need to add a family member, the process here is exactly the same as a program enrollment intake. I'll select this box and enter the family member's name here, search for the family member, and then save and close after completing all of their information. Because there are no duplicates in the system, I can continue entering this client. Once I've entered all the required information for this family member, I'll save and close. The next page in this workflow is the diversion assessment. If you're unsure how to complete a diversion conversation with your client, please request diversion training so that you can understand what this conversation looks like. The questions in this assessment are not a script, and more information should be discussed with the client aside from the questions on your screen. While you may not complete this diversion assessment in real time as you're recording this assessment in the system, you need to be aware when you're having the diversion conversation that there are some required questions on this page, especially regarding current living situation. Looking at the questions on the page, we have an assessment date. This defaults to today, but if I had this diversion conversation with my client 3 days ago, I can enter that date appropriately. Next, we have the contact type. Did you speak with the client over the phone, in a virtual visit, or in person? Choose the option which most closely relates to how you contacted the client. The next question is household type. Since my client has a family member, I'll choose household with children and adults. Choose the option here that again matches your client's situation most closely. Is this a household without children, a household with children and adults, a household with only children, or is it unknown? The next questions are regarding current living situation. Where did your client stay last night, the night before this diversion assessment or diversion conversation was had? On this case, because I am saying this assessment was completed on 5/22, this current living situation question would pertain to 5/21. I can enter details here about the situation if I would like to, but they're not required. Note that if you answer with a transitional or permanent housing situation or some other answers in this dropdown, new questions will populate below. Next, record whether or not the client is willing to discuss alternative housing solutions to help them avoid homelessness. This is a yes or no question. If you answer yes, more questions will populate about what brought on the housing crisis, who the client might be able to stay with, and what other kind of assistance might be needed for them to avoid homelessness. If you answer no, then no other questions will populate. Whether or not you answer yes or no to this question, and regardless of the client's answers to the other questions, you will also need to answer, was this household diverted, yes or no? Selecting yes here means that the client did not actually enter our CAS system. You can record any diversion services that you have provided while you diverted this client. And then at the bottom of the page, you'll need to scroll down and record a exit diversion assessment, including the exit date and the exit destination. Let's say they exited on the same day that we assessed them because they did not need to enter our system. And let's say they're exiting to a friend's house. Next, wherever this client is exiting, you will need to provide some host information. So you need a first name and a last name for this host, the relationship of this host to the client. I'll record friend as the host relationship. However, note that it could be that the client is hosting themselves. If you've diverted the client back to a living situation where they are supporting themselves or living alone, then you would record the client as the host as well. And then at least a phone number where you can contact that person. You can record address if you'd like as well. Clicking Save here will divert the client and not enroll them in CAS. The client will not be part of our coordinated access system and will not be placed on the housing priority list or CAS queue. Any services that were recorded as part of this diversion will be recorded as diversion services. Let's click Save and see what this looks like in the system. Notice that I never got to the program enrollment page of the workflow. I did not enroll this client in a program. I can finish and close the workflow. This client has no active enrollments on their HMIS record, and some diversion service was recorded for them. However, they do now have a record in HMIS. So maybe I diverted this client on the 22nd, but now they're coming back to me on the 25th. They are experiencing homelessness again, and this time they're not going to be diverted. Let's take a look at this intake when we choose not to divert the client. I'm here on my client's dashboard, but if I needed to find my client, I could search for them using the Find Client feature. I'm still logged in under Dallas and Collin Counties CAS. I want to confirm that before I continue with my CAS intake. And in my menu on the left, I have chosen Coordinated Access System, CAS, and I will click on CAS and Diversion Intake to enroll the client into coordinated entry. This time, I'm not adding a new client. I'm using the client whose record I'm already on, so I'll choose Use the Current Client. The basic client information will pre-populate. I should sit with the client and confirm that these are accurate. And when I'm content that this information is true and accurate for my client, click Finish. Next, I'm taken to the Family Members page, where again, I should confirm that every family member's information is true and accurate, and click Save and Close. Next, I see the diversion assessment again. This time, we'll record the assessment date for today, and we'll say that this client was not diverted. In this situation, our client did stay with a friend. They were willing to discuss other options to avoid homelessness, but this time the client does anticipate having to leave this current living situation within the next 14 days. Perhaps this housing crisis was brought on by an eviction, and they have not identified any other subsequent residents. The next question says, is there anyone else you and your family could stay with for the next 3 or up to 14 days if you receive some limited services? For this client, we'll say no. Does your client have the resources or support to obtain other permanent housing? And for the purposes of this assessment, we'll say no. If your client would need any other assistance to help them either stay at an alternative or previous housing destination, you can choose those options here. There is an option for other if you don't see a situation here that most closely applies to the assistance your client would need, but then you would be required to enter what that other assistance is. This is a multi-select box, so you can choose as many options here as needed for your client. Next, you'll answer if it would help the client to be able to contact the person that they could stay with, and answer a few more questions about your client's previous living situations. Again, no matter what the answers to all of these current living situation questions are, you will need to answer the question, was the household diverted? This time we'll select no. Notice that no other questions populate. We are not going to record any diversion services or a diversion exit because we are not diverting this client. Let's click Save to continue to the program enrollment for CAS. On the HUD program enrollment screen, this should look very familiar to you because it looks exactly like the program enrollment for your program at your agency. However, in the project dropdown, you should see that only DCC CAS is available for this client. If you see any other project here and you're trying to enroll your client in CAS, please stop, cancel this workflow, go back and make sure that you're logged in under the correct organization. If you are enrolling a client in CAS, you should only see the CAS Coordinated Entry project as an option on this page. Check the box next to each family member who will be enrolled in CAS. If the whole family is being enrolled, you can use the Select All box to choose every family member. Note the project start date automatically defaults to today, but I can backdate here if necessary. Please also note that you can change the case manager here. This case manager is assigned at program enrollment and will default to you, the person completing the intake. If a different HMIS user should receive updates about this client's status on the CAS queue or HPL, you can change this here. Once I have confirmed everything on this page is correct, I will click Save to enroll this client in CAS and begin the CAS intake. Some of these pages will look very similar. First, we have the Universal Data Assessment page that is the same as we see in other program enrollments. I'll choose whether or not my client has a disabling condition, the client location, which is our CoC, and the client's prior living situation. Answer these questions as accurately as possible for your client on the night prior to this assessment. In this case, that would be the night prior to 5/25 or the night of 5/24. Next, record whether or not your client has any health insurance. Remember that Parkland insurance is not considered health insurance for the purposes of this assessment. After you have recorded all the universal data, click Save. Next is the barriers page, which is also completed in the same manner as a program enrollment. Because I've chosen yes on the previous page for disabling condition, I will need to select yes for at least one barrier here to continue the workflow. I can use the Select All box to have the system select no for every barrier, then go back and choose the barrier that I need to select yes for my client. Once I have recorded all barriers, I will save and close. Next is income, and again, this page should look familiar to you if you have completed new user training. Record whether or not your client has any current income. We'll say yes, this client does have a bit of monthly income, but no non-cash benefits. Then save and close. The next page of this workflow is the SPMI or mental assessment. For the purposes of this intake, you can skip this page. The only thing that is recorded is an assessment date. No other information is required. If your agency feels strongly about the need to use this form as a part of your assessment, please submit a SpiceWorks ticket to request support from the HMIS team. For now, all agencies are being asked to skip this page by simply clicking Save and Close. The next page of this workflow is the document checklist, or quick document check. Document check is where we will upload all documents related to CAS. We've placed this page in the intake so that you can easily upload any documents that you already have on hand for your client. However, a document upload for intake is not required. It's very important that our community is able to assess clients and get them enrolled in CAS, even with no documentation currently on file. So, if you have documentation at this stage, great, go ahead and upload it here if you'd like. However, it is not required to continue enrolling your client into coordinated entry. I will briefly demonstrate how to upload a document here. Note that the verification date is defaulted to my program enrollment date. I have the option in the document checklist to choose that I'm either uploading homeless documentation or disability documentation. Under homeless, I have the option to upload a homeless verification, a housing status verification, or an identity verification. Under the disability checklist, I have the option to upload disability verification. If you're choosing to upload a document, you do need to at least select the type of document you're uploading. For disability, I have the option to upload a doctor's letter or an SSI awards letter. For the homeless documents, I have several different options under each of these. Choose the one which best suits the document that you're uploading for your client. For the purposes of this assessment, let's say I'm uploading a third-party letter. When I scroll over, I have several options here. None of these are required. It is recommended that you put in the comments, especially for homeless documentation, the agency that you work for, since this will just be recorded under Dallas and Collin Counties CAS, so I could put MDHA here. And then the time period that this homeless documentation verifies homelessness for your client. So perhaps this is for April of 2021. That way, as a CAS admin is reviewing these documents, it's easy for them to tell which document this is. You might have more than one third-party letter uploaded into the system for your client. We will need to choose some sort of file to upload. When I select Choose File, I'm given the option to upload a document from my computer, and then click Open. To save this file, I can click Save, and then upload a new document if I'd like, or save and close to continue to the next page of the workflow. The last page of this workflow is the VI SPDAT. Because this client has a dependent child, the family VI SPDAT has populated. However, if this was a household with no children or a single adult, then a regular VI SPDAT would populate. A VI SPDAT will be required for your client to be prioritized on the CAS queue. However, it's not necessary for you to complete the VI SPDAT at the time of entry. Of course, we understand that a client may not be ready to complete the VI SPDAT conversation with you as soon as you begin assessing them or begin forming a relationship with them. So completing the VI SPDAT at this time is not required to continue the workflow. You can enroll your client in CAS and then come back later to complete the VI SPDAT when your client is ready. Just understand that until you complete the VI SPDAT, your client will be pending on the CAS queue instead of being prioritized. Whether or not you complete the VI SPDAT at this time, you will need to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page. This little box is easy to miss, but it is required, so you can't continue the workflow without choosing an option here. Prioritization status will determine whether or not your client is placed on the CAS queue or HPL. To place your client on the queue, open the drop-down and choose Placed on Prioritization List. Again, this option is required for your client to be placed on the CAS queue or HPL. Even if you're not completing the VI SPDAT at this time, you will need to scroll down and choose this option for your client to be placed on the queue. If the VI SPDAT is not complete, their status will be pending. If the VI SPDAT is complete, then the client can be assigned a score and prioritized. Either way, once you have chosen to place your client on the queue, click Save. Because this client has a family member, I'm also required to complete their assessment at this time. If this client had no family members, I would be able to finish the workflow here. Always work to the end of the workflow until you see the button that says Finish Close the Workflow, and click that button. Now I can see that my client has been enrolled in coordinated entry. And if I go back to my home workspace, I can see my client on the queue. So let's find that client. There's my client, Graham Moore. This client has been placed on the queue. You can see that because I did not complete the VI SPDAT, their intake status is pending. It's important to note that only the head of household will appear on the queue, but the family member tied to that enrollment will be enrolled in coordinated entry as well. Let's take a look at that family member's record. Here you can see that the family member is enrolled in coordinated entry, but they will not appear on the CAS queue. Any referrals made from the head of household's record will apply to their family as well. And that concludes our video on the CAS and Diversion Intake Assessment for Dallas and Collin Counties CAS.